Hello, my name is Suzette Webley, and I am going to talk about the 10 skull and vertebra features. They are labeled individually and colored, and I'm also going to talk about the 3 sutures. So as you can see, this is my skull. And first we're going to talk about the frontal bone. As you can see, the frontal bone is a single pair bone. And you can see that it is an anterior view and it is also superior to the skull. Next, I am going to talk about the parietal bone. The parietal bone, all right here in red. The parietal bone is a pair bone and is on the lateral part of the skull. As you can see, the parietal bone, and it is a pair bone, and it is at the lateral part of the skull. Next, I am going to talk about the occipital bone, which is in purple right here. The occipital bone. The occipital bone is a single bone and it is located at the posterior part of the skull. And you know the posterior is the back. And this is the occipital bone. Next, I'm going to talk about the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone right here in blue. The sphenoid bone is a single bone and it is located laterally, the lateral part of the skull, and it sits anteriorly on the cranium. As you can see, the sphenoid bone. Next up is the ethmoid bone. The ethmoid bone is right here. And this bone is a single bone and it is located at the roof of the nasal cavity. And it is actually inferior of the roof of the nasal cavity. And this is called the ethmoid bone right here. Next up is the nasal bone right here in green, right here. And you can see it actually a pair bone. And this bone forms the bridge of the nose. And is actually superiorly at the bridge of the nose. And this is called the nasal bone. So my next bone is the zymatic bone, right here in green. And the zymatic bones, these bones are pair bones of the skull and it forms a major part of the cheekbone. Each bones articulate with the frontal bone and the maxillary temporal bone and the sphenoid bone. So you can see the zymatic bone right here, and it is a major part of the cheekbone, and it articulates with the frontal bone right here, the sphenoid bone, and also the temporal bone. My next bone we're going to talk about is the temporal bone, all right here in brown. So the temporal bone is a pair bone that form the lateral walls of the skull. Each bone are deep into the temple and are superficial side of the head posteriorly to each eye. As you can see, the temporal bone, it is a pair of bones. And it is superficially on the side of the head and is actually posterior to the eye. And as we said, posterior is going towards the back, normally the back. My next bone is the mandible bone. The mandible bone, which we also call the lower jaw, is located at it forms the entire lower jaw. And the mandible bone is located inferiorly on the facial skeleton. It is the largest and it is the strongest bone of the face. It forms the lower jaw, as you can see, and it also holds the lower teeth, and it articulates on each side of the temporal bone. This is our mandible. Next bone, and the last bone we're going to talk about, is the maxillary bone, all right here in yellow. And the maxillary bone, also known as the upper jaw, involved in formation of the orbit and the nose and the palate. It holds the upper teeth, and it also important role of communication and mastication. This is the maxillary, all right here in yellow. Next, I'm going to talk about the 3 sutures. We have the first sutures up is the coronal suture. As you can see, it's extended, or I could say it's prolonged across the skull. The coronal sutures, it prolongs across the skull, and it is between the frontal bone and each parietal bone. Parietal bone, and each parietal bone. Next, I am going to talk about the quamus suture. The quamus suture is a pair bilateral suture, and it connects the temporal and the parietal bones. As you can see right here, and right here is the temporal bone, and you can see it connects to the parietal bones right here. Last, I am going to talk about the lamboid suture. The lamboid suture is located between the occipital bone and the parietal bone. This is the occipital bone right here, and this is the 2 parietal bone, and there is the lamboid suture. And this suture looks like a V shape on the anatomic position. And there you go. This is my facial skull of the 10 facial bones. I talk about the frontal bone. I talk about the parietal bone. I talk about the occipital bone and the sphenoid, zygomatic bone, the ethmoid bone, and the nasal bone. Thank you.